So you mentioned that. So access to certain animals, but then that doesn't that kind of contradict as well as far as what other groups are doing? What as far as breeding, if the ACA is also doing the same thing, is it only specific species that we're seeing that that are endangered, or is it when it comes to big cats as well? Because I still see billboards here and there of certain zoos. Oh, come visit the cubs, the new cubs, and this and that. So aren't they kind of almost doing the same thing as far as doing the whole animal trade and breeding to have more animals amongst their zoos?
Well, yeah, what's absolutely true and consistent among whether it's a roadside zoo or the AZA is they're breeding for the captive supply. So they're breeding to grow a captive supply. And this isn't me again, this is coming from the mouths of the
Sure.
AZA themselves.
No,
Like they're
absolutely.
not ever to do habitat reintroduction, or at least not in the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to breed to reintroduce charismatic megafauna like tigers or elephants.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most critically endangered animals in their populations. They're not doing habitat reintroduction. It's extremely expensive work
Right.
and very risky too.
Sure.
So yeah, that's true. They're breeding to create a captive supply. Because it's hard to breed animals in captivity and maintain genetic diversity.
Yeah.
And some species like elephants die faster than they're being born because they're so ill suited to life in captivity that they don't breed well. And they're just being traded around like baseball cards, families broken up. And these are animals who, their natural behavior is to stay with their families for life.
Right. Yeah.
They're importing wild captured elephants at this point from Africa to supplement the captive population because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Like we won't, and that's definitely a question about like at what point are we actually helping
Mm-hmm.
the end game for these animals in the wild?
Right.
If we get to the point that we're taking them from the wild to
Right.
put them in small enclosures
Yeah.
under the theory that somehow people are going to be inspired by seeing them in captivity.
Right.
And a lot of the research shows that people aren't that inspired to get engaged in legitimate conservation by seeing these animals in zoos. So
yeah, it feels a little counterintuitive as far as what they do. And I mean, a perfect example is I know Billy the elephant here in LA Zoo that they've been trying to get out to, I believe, to Paws Sanctuary up in Northern California, where it could have acres and acres and acres of land. But because elephants, the seed is a lot of money and they can produce more, that they won't get rid of it, at least is from the last thing that I heard. So it just seems kind of weird and it's kind of counterintuitive that, I like you said, they lost their accreditation, but it doesn't, in my eyes, I see it's just how does that really affect them? Because can't they just, you said they don't have access to certain animals, but can't they just immediately just go to a roadside zoo somewhere out the side and then just start doing their own breeding program?
That would make it very hard for them to re-enter the AZA. I think that what we're going to see over the next couple of years, first of all, they're appealing the decision. So that remains to be seen. Who knows? Maybe the AZA will decide that they've done enough to impose changes, though. The AZA has said we need to make sure that these changes stick.
Right.
So, it sounds like the AZA is probably going to lean towards, keeping them unaccredited for the next couple of years and watching and waiting to see how they behave. I think they're under a microscope right now.
Yeah.
And if they were to go outside the AZA, I think it would make it harder for them, not easier, to come back.
Right.
And they want to come back to the AZA. There's no way that they would want to just remain unaccredited.
Right. And do you think that the organization now, after this, the conservation has been put to light, you think there'll be them maybe doing more investigation on different zoos and see if they are doing the same thing? Because, I know for a fact there's a lot of those other zoos out there that are doing what you mentioned before, and bringing out a cheetah or bringing out whatever exotic bird to take a photo. And these are accredited zoos. So do you think this will trickle down and stop that as well?
I think that, this is going to have, I think that other zoos are certainly sitting up and taking notice. We've seen a lot of zoos step up and throw their support behind the Big Cat Public Safety Act, who either hadn't voiced their support in the past or maybe who just wanted to reiterate it. And so we're seeing that there is definitely other zoos are paying attention to what's going on around the conservation game. And there's not anything to really, this has all been happening, on TV. It's not like we're like, this is gotcha journalism, like this is just putting together a body of work to show a pattern and practice of how these animals are treated and where they're acquired from, where they're dumped, how they're, how the quote unquote experts are lying about them, and what the life cycle is for one of these cats who these conservationists use, if we can even find where they get dumped or end up, because many of them just disappear into the ether.
Right.
So, anyway, it's, I think that we're going to see additional changes. I think that the AZA likely is going to have to make changes on the accrediting level in terms of animal ambassadors and how everybody uses those animals, because otherwise it's going to become a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like the Columbus Zoo got taken care of, and then here comes another zoo that does this, and then it's just it will be, the other zoos won't have as much of an incentive to change if the AZA doesn't lay down the gauntlet and say it's a new day and we have new expectations.
Well, they'll have to figure out how to supplement that money they're going to lose from those entertainment services that they're providing, if you want to call it that.
It's baby animals and animals who we can are offered for contact are big money makers. And and Carol Baskin put it so well, like in the conservation game, like she says, like even when people know, like even if they have an intellectual understanding that it's a bad thing, if you're presented with a tiger cub or snow leopard cub or one of these just absolutely spectacular animals, like the thoughts about the underlying issues go out the window, and the thought turns to, when can I pet that animal? And so and this has been happening in the halls of Congress where it's not even legal.
I saw that.
So there's, this is just going to be, I think that we're just seeing the beginning of the changes that are happening. And so it's, but it's really positive stuff. It's such a swift impact. I mean, you're a documentary filmmaker, like what you hope is that you're going to help trigger change.
Absolutely.
And from, I know from our perspective, with this particular film, like, gosh, it happened quick.
Yeah.